On today's episode of the Unveil podcast, I had the pleasure of chatting with Dr. Irene Kopp. Dr. Irene is the CEO and founder of the Stress to Success S.H.I.F.T Institute. Because of her own catastrophic burnout and near-fatal experience, Dr. Irene's passionate about guiding purpose-driven high achievers in bouncing back from setbacks so they can enjoy true 360-degree success. To help her family heal against all odds, she developed an innovative protocol that she now uses with clients all over the world so they can optimize their focus and productivity, accelerate their progress, and amplify their results to levels unseen before. Now, Dr. Irene and I dig into exactly what happened in her near-fatal experience during this episode. It is a powerful story of how belief in potential and setting yourself up for success can really yield miraculous results. Dr. Irene's comprehensive background and expertise spans both Eastern and Western medicine as a medical doctor and a doctor of chiropractic. It includes extensive training in acupuncture, neuroplasticity, elite performance psychology, leadership, stress management, neurophysiological meditation, and resilience. She has helped over 200,000 people feel and live better. And she is the host of the internationally acclaimed podcast, The Stress to Success S.H.I.F.T. Dr. Irene is a powerful stand for what is possible when we look at life in a different way. I really hope that you enjoy listening to this episode and to Dr. Irene's story. And do check out the show notes or stay tuned to the end of this episode where I share with you an exclusive Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp 2.0 starting on September the 26th. You can find the details in the show notes now, and I know that by the time you've listened to this podcast, you will be passionate about jumping on board with Dr. Irene's work. So welcome, Dr. Irene Kopp, to the Unveil podcast.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I appreciate you.
I'm really excited to talk to you today because I know fragments of your story from what I've managed to kind of find out and listen to and look at. And we had a conversation when you interviewed me on your podcast. And from just the nuggets you were sharing, I was like, oh, I like this person. She has lots to say. So why don't you just, for our audience, give your little storyline. Who are you and what do you do? And the question I love to ask people is, how do you serve?
Oh, that is a wonderful, wonderful question. Thank you. So I am Dr. Irene Kopp. I am CEO and founder of the Stress to Success S.H.I.F.T Institute. And we have like a world-class faculty of about 13 other coaches, doctors, and trainers that really range from in all areas of life, right? From many and functional medicine, because that health and energy is many people's greatest wound. And we also have relationships and real resilience. Michael Osterlink, one of our mutual friends and colleagues. And we have business and leadership coach. We have executive. We have financial trainers. So we have like literally like the whole gamut, and we are adding more as we go. And the reason for that is because I have learned through my experience, and I'm going to say my clinical experience, my educational experience, my life experience, that you truly can't have success in one area of your life and sacrifice in all of the others. So we really need a paradigm shift around success. And so I talk about true 360-degree success. So what does success look like in your career? And by that, I mean contribution, right? It's not just somebody who's working a job. What's 10 out of 10 success look like for you in your wealth, in your relationships, your health, your energy, your personal life? And we can add in there your spirituality. In other words, it includes your raison d'etre, your big ikigai, your big why, however you choose to say it, right? In other words, and that is why I have, it's been my baby, my vision to create this institute that is global and serves on all levels. So that is where I'm at right now and enjoying myself tremendously while I am bringing this to the world, because it is my big ikigai.
And I think that anyone who's been a long-term listener to the Unveil podcast will instantly understand from anyone who says more matters than just the one thing. All of my long-term listeners really get that from me and from everything that we do at our company. So that is a true point of alignment for us. And I really, whenever anyone develops something like your institute and has this concept of bringing in the experts and allowing success to be on multiple levels, my little coach brain goes into, this has to have come from somewhere. And so what I'd really love for you to share is kind of the why. Why is this your big ikigai? Why is this the kind of thing that you landed on? And what was your personal journey to get to this point?
That is a brilliant question, and it's so important. So I'd love for your listeners to listen to my story, not just about as my story, understanding, because I am an educator at heart, that you must choose your ikigai, your big why, right? If you don't have a purpose in life that gets you up every single morning, you're not free, you are lost. And sometimes the universe chooses your ikigai for you. Well, at least maybe like smacks you over the head with it and says, here.
Yeah.
Right. In other words, and it's often aligned with your highest, but no, I'm going to say the best purpose is aligned with your highest purpose and potential in life, right? So mine stems from the fact that for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be a doctor. Always, always. Even as a child, I remember being 5 years old. And one of my old aunts, they always seem old, don't they?
Right. Yeah.
Said to me, so what would you like to be when you grow up, dear? And I said, I want to be a doctor. Oh my, don't you mean a nurse? Because at that time, this shows how old I am, Victoria, right? Women still only, went into basically two professions, a nurse and a teacher. Really, maybe secretary was starting to work in there, right? But those two or three things, and I'm like, no, I want to be a doctor. Now, at that time, honestly, I don't know that I was thinking about serving people. My mom was head of a department in the hospital, not a doctor, but I still saw the doctors because she was a single mom. And at a time when single moms weren't a thing. No, I would go into the hospital with her. I knew that hospital crannies and nooks and crannies more than I think maybe anybody but the janitors or the maintenance people did, because it was a different time. But I saw the doctors and I saw how much reverence they got and how much respect they got. And I wanted that. Right. Plus that, I was pretty darn sure that I wanted to be the one giving the orders, not taking the orders. Right.
Yeah, I can relate.
Even at 5 years old, I had that figured out for some reason. So yeah, I mean, for me, it was always, I always knew what I wanted as far as that part. I would say I grew into the calling. I grew into the calling. So my first doctor degree was as a doctor of chiropractic. And I always say that was my baptism by fire, because it wasn't like just taking, one bachelor's degree or a master's or a PhD. It was so intense. The number of courses we had, it was like taking 3 bachelor's degrees all at once.
Yeah.
Like literally 10 hours of classes every single day, and then going home and expected to study for hours and hours, like more so than the medical degree I got later. Like it really, truly was. I call it my baptism by fire. I became a chiropractor. And to me, a chiropractor doesn't just mean like a back doctor. A a chiropractor is, it's that holistic, WHOLE, holistic doctor who looks at the whole person and gets to the root cause. And I know, Victoria, that you have a background in functional medicine, and really that's what functional medicine is. Like, at its heart is getting to the root cause. And looking at the whole person rather than conventional medicine, which is, pulling out this symptom and, oh, you have high blood pressure, here's a high blood pressure pill. Oh, you've got diabetes, here's metformin, right? And so on. And so by this point, even though I may have started out going, I got into it for the respect, for the prestige at an immature level. At the same time, I remember by the second year of chiropractic, which was like the worst of the worst, it was like the most grueling. Yeah. Dr. Bernie Siegel came to town. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dr. Bernie Siegel. Yeah. Have you? Okay. Yes. So for your listeners who may not have heard of him, he was one of the pioneers of integrative medicine. Him, Dr. Norm Shealy, who I've had the pleasure of meeting, amazing doctors who are conventionally trained in medicine, who found their way and realized that conventional medicine wasn't making the grade for whatever reason. And so for Dr. Bernie Siegel, it was working with oncology patients, cancer patients, and he began to realize that there were commonalities in people that he saw who got cancer, and as well as those who beat cancer. And so when he came to town, I went to go hear him speak live, and he talked about cancer as being a manifestation of something eating you up inside. And which was, a shock to me. It was like an eye opener. I was just like, wow, right? In other words, and again, not talking all cancers. There are some very few cancers that are purely like genetically driven, but the vast majority of cancers are preventable. And so he talked about anger, rage, resentment as, that if you hold it inside, that'll literally like fester inside until it grows this cancer. And he gave the example of one of his patients who was a very, very successful lawyer who developed cancer. And when Dr. Siegel worked backwards with him, as we like to do, right, he found out that as this gentleman was growing up, what his true passion was music. He wanted to be a concert violinist. And and his parents did what a lot of parents do nowadays. Here's a lesson to our listeners, please. That they trained him, they were proud of him, right? Took him to competitions or performances and, helped him develop his skill. And then he got to the end of high school and they're like, oh, no, you're not going to school for music. You need to get a real job. Right? How many well-meaning parents say that? Right? You have to get a real job. I mean, coming out of a time, in the not so distant past where it was a matter of survival. I get it. I understand. And at the same time, it was, for this young man, it was the killer of his dream. So he was dutiful and became a very successful lawyer. That resentment festered. inside until it developed cancer into cancer. And all of this was a massive eye-opener for me as I'm listening to Dr. Bernie Siegel talk. And then he asked a question of the audience. And he said, don't answer me. You don't need to answer out loud, but answer to yourself this question. If I found out that I had 6 months to live, would I keep doing what I'm doing? If I learned I had 6 months to live, would I keep doing what I'm doing? And I thought about it. And that, I think, was that turning point where I went, no, I'm exactly right where I want and need to be. Because if I had that prognosis, it doesn't matter how grueling this is, it's where I'm meant to be. And so, yeah, my answer to myself was, no, I'm in the right place. I'm meant to be doing this. I love doing this. You know, and I'm sure there was part of my brain that went, and like hell, it's going to be 6 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Not a real question. So,
well, but I've used that with my clients time and time again.
Yeah.
Since, because it's so powerful a question. And many over the last couple of years have been answering that in a different way, right? You know, birth to the Great Resignation. And people realizing that, you know, the jobs that they were staying in before because of, quote, security, they now realize that there is no such thing as security. And the future isn't promised. So your best and choice is to take back control and choose your own path to do what you want. Now, that may still be working within a company. It may be choosing to change things within the same company. It may be choosing to use, you know, your skills and, you know, find a different company, or it might be going out on your own, or maybe going into remote working for the same company because, you know, part of your big vision for yourself is to live and work anywhere in the world, right? There is no right or wrong. And I used the word choose a number of times there, very, very deliberately, right? Because so many people, especially over the last couple of years, have felt that they are victimized by life and that sea bug that's, you know, been traveling the planet, and by government dictates and this and that, and all the fear and the uncertainty and the unrest and chaos, and, you know, and it's so when you choose, you're taking back control, right? And it's one of my favorite things to teach is that you always have choice and control, even if it's not the kind that you want, but you always do have some form of choice and control, unless somebody has drugged you.
Right. Yes.
Right. Yeah. Literally, even if somebody's holding a gun to your head, you still have choice and control. It may not be the choice and control you want. Just saying. So, as you know, and that may seem flippant, and I'll refer to one of my favorite heroes and mentors is Dr. Viktor Frankl, who was survivor of 4 Holocaust death camps, neuropsychiatrist, who said, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, his ability to think and his ability to respond in any given moment. And this was somebody who survived the worst of the worst, like losing everything he owned, lost his family, lost his dignity, lost, you know, really his humanity, because they dehumanized him and everyone else, and, you know, lived in constant fear for his life. So yes, literally, that is, to me, again, if I look at some of my heroes, Dr. Viktor Frankl is definitely one of them, because very few of us on this planet currently can match up to, not that it's a competition, it'd be bad competition, to that level of intensity around their lives. So that is, and I know I went down a rabbit hole here from your original comment question, but it's
literally
all part
the point
of
our podcast. No, it is. And this is the thing. This is why I love, and I just let people talk, because the rabbit holes are part of it, because we're all in this kind of like trying to make sense of human existence and process and progress. And it isn't, yes, X happened and it led to Y and then I ended up at Z. It is very much these kind of fragments that filter in from powerful questions to really recognizing that you are on purpose. And all of these gems and nuggets are really useful. So never apologize for rabbit holes on the Unveil podcast at all.
Well, I'm Canadian, so the Canadian, like the national word in Canada is sorry. People think it's A, but it's really I'm sorry. So back to the story. So that was in chiropractic school. And I graduated from there raring and, to change the world, help everyone in the world. And at the same time, I was determined, just as that stubborn 5-year-old probably was, to have my cake and eat it too, and have the perfect life, be the perfect mother, be the perfect doctor, be the perfect everything. Add in a huge dollop of programming that told me that. And as well, a massive dollop of trauma and abuse. I grew up in a very abusive childhood household because my father suffered from PTSD from atrocities he had witnessed, and he did the best he could. Coming back from there at a time when PTSD wasn't recognized from the Congo, and said, they basically said, suck it up, take it like a man. And by the way, this is confidential and you're not allowed to talk to anyone about it. Yeah. So he did what any good soldier did. He soldiered on and he self-medicated with alcohol. So, based on that and the programming of my conservative farmer upbringing, I was taught, you have to be perfect or don't show up. Because you never knew that if you weren't perfect, that might upset somebody and somebody might get hurt. Right. And that I learned, that I needed to soothe the waters, keep everyone happy around me, that was key. Keep the bear happy, and everybody else would be healthy and safe. So a number of these were playing in the background, and I wasn't even aware of it, on top of my calling, my drive to help as many people as possible. 10 years in, I had a very, very successful practice, had one of the best years of my life. By this point, I was a single mom. And again, determined to be the perfect mom, the perfect doctor, the perfect business person. I worked like a dog when I didn't have my sons, so that I could be the perfect mom when they were with me. And I was, doing 12-hour days, working 6 days a week, like around there when I had them. I was on the board of the PTA, the Parent Teachers Association. I was on the board of directors for the Business Improvement Association. I ran one of the most successful and biggest festivals in Toronto, almost single-handedly, myself and my office manager. All of this was going on, and I thought I was on top of the world. Right? I literally thought I was on top of the world until one day I was driving in northern Canada on a weekend away, and I lost consciousness and the road curved, and I drove straight into a massive rock face, as only northern Canada has that I know of. And I broke 10 bones. And, that's not the least of it. As I was sitting there, propping myself up I had my fists like this, and I was literally holding myself up for quite some time as they used the jaws of life to cut us out, because I didn't even realize at the time that I had broken both sides of my pelvis in amongst the 10 bones. And I'm watching, an engine fire in the engine. I could hear my 6-year-old son running around and, chattering away. There were adults throwing up at the scene. Couldn't see my youngest son, my 4-year-old son, who was sitting behind me, and found out shortly after that he had suffered a catastrophic brain injury and needed to be airlifted to the nearest pediatric hospital in Toronto, 3 hours away. And all of this happened during the first SARS. So the sea bug that's traveling the planet right now is the second SARS. So this was during the first SARS. So I was in hospital on SARS quarantine in one hospital. My youngest son was in Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, undergoing emergency life-saving surgery, and then kept in an induced coma for like 3 weeks because they weren't even sure if he was going to live. My 6-year-old son, I was getting reports third hand that he was constantly kicked out of school because he was throwing chairs, he was spitting on teachers. Now that may seem funny, but he was also threatening to hurt himself. In other words, he had PTSD. And I'm all by myself, lying flat on my hospital bed because of all the broken bones in this dark hospital room. And I'm bawling my eyes out, blubbering. I'm not a pretty crier, not like Demi Moore in the slightest. And I was crying out like, why me? Why me? Like, and Victoria, I know you said, what's your big why? Well, I was literally like crying out to God, source, universe, whatever you want to call it. Why me? There was a huge dose of self-pity. I admit it, pain from 10 broken bones, not being able to have visitors, having recently got even worse news that, we won't go into today, that precipitated this episode that I'm describing. But there is a deeper part of why me? I'm a doctor. I treat others with this. I do everything right. I eat right. I exercise. I teach meditation. Right? Like, why me? And at the same time, my inner judge and jury had already tried, convicted, and basically like hung me out to dry. Like, what kind of mother are you to almost kill your sons? Didn't matter that I didn't intend to do it. It didn't matter that I didn't just fall asleep at the wheel, that I hadn't been drinking, that I hadn't been doing drugs. It didn't matter. The result was the same. What kind of doctor was I to not have known? What kind of monster was I? Like, at that moment, I seriously questioned whether I ever had any right or should be allowed near my sons ever again, and really whether I deserved to live. Like, it was the darkest moment of my life. But here's the thing. I then realized I had a choice. Is that word again? That I could either keep spiraling down in guilt and shame, remorse, frankly, self-pity, or I could transmute that burden of guilt to the burden of responsibility of helping others, of giving myself the grace, the same grace I would give a girlfriend, a loved one, a patient, and understand that much as I might have liked to think that I was special, I was simply a statistic, a victim, and I'll use that word in this case only, in this case, of a pandemic that's been going on far longer than the sea bug and has just gotten worse and worse. And that is the pandemic of chronic stress, burnout, and catastrophic burnout that I suffered. And I use the term flame out syndrome to describe it, because burnout is only, this is a little pet peeve of mine, burnout, according to its original definition and according to the World Health Organization, is only workplace related stress and only mental and emotional.
Right.
Which, okay, well, guess what? That's not adequate to describe what the catastrophic version is. So that's why I borrowed the term, the aviation term, for when you lose one or more engines, that you may be able to pull out of it. But if you can't pull out of it, you may crash and burn, as I did. And that crash and burn can show up, as it did with me, like an accident caused by a physical condition that was silent and I didn't even know was there. Or it could be other chronic conditions that are top killers worldwide, even now, and even during this past sea bug pandemic. You know, whether it's diabetes, heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, right? Autoimmune conditions, which even if they're not, fatal, can cause a massive, burden of disability, right? All of these increased risk of infections. Do we know one? Seriously. Like, in other words, that has been a pandemic far longer, like literally the top 10 killers worldwide are either caused or greatly exacerbated by chronic stress, leading to adrenal exhaustion and flame out syndrome. And so I realized that with my clinical background, my education, and now my personal experience, I was the perfect one to stand up and lead the charge in eliminating this pandemic. And I decided at that point, I chose as my ikigai that if I could save one person, one family from the suffering and the fate that my family did and almost died, then I would be successful. So that became my raison d'etre, my reason for being, my reason I get up every morning. And I'd like to say that I just made that decision and it was so easy. And I just started crying to the high heavens, like for everyone to hear me. No, it took years and years, even after they decided that he would live. My youngest son I was told by top experts in the world that he would never walk again. He would never talk again, and he wouldn't pass high school. He's literally missing, and I have permission from him to say this, is he's literally missing like a third of his left hemisphere of his brain.
Oh, wow.
And again, the mama bear in me went like hell, not on my watch. So I spent years and hundreds of thousands of dollars literally finding whatever answers were needed to help him heal against all odds. I became certified in brain injury. I went back and got my medical degree. I got multiple coaching certifications in various levels because I got sick and tired of having the other experts say to me, "It's okay, Mom. We know what's best for your son. We're the experts." Again, I went like hell. I know my son. I know what he needs. I know what he's capable of. And so, yeah, that was that, and helping him. It helped, I think, that we were in a wheelchair at the same time as he learned to walk again. And I used belief. It all starts with belief. And I taught him all the way along that he was a genius, that this was a gift for him to go through this, because when the going got tough for everyone else, that he would just keep going.
Yeah.
And that he was going to go further and farther beyond because of it. And he worked hard. I had experts accuse me. I remember one, like point blank, accused me of being abusive because of the amount of therapy and tutoring I expected my son to go through. Like, I'm not saying it was easy. Like, come on. It's like neuroplasticity needs some help here, right? It's like neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain to change and heal itself. And it takes training. And that child, right from the time he was 4 years old, basically had a part-time job. Like, he had school full-time, and then every day after school and off and on weekends through the summer vacations, he had at least 2 hours of therapy or tutoring every single day. On the other hand, I'm happy to say that he not only walks and talks, he's in his 4th year of engineering at one of the best universities in Canada right now. And yes, I cried the day he was accepted.
I'm not surprised. That's amazing.
Yeah. So you could say that my son was my first client of my new life.
Yeah.
Really, truly. And what I realized was that if it could help him, it could help so many more. So then I started applying it to my clients in my practice. I prefer to call them clients. And I would be getting these so-called miraculous results. But I realized that they weren't miraculous. It was just unexpected based on conventional medicine. And I literally, so that I wouldn't be considered a quack, there may be some at some point that do, and that's fine. That's why I went back to school and got my medical degree and passed all my board exams and all of that, so that I could prove to them I'm not a quack, and in other words, to give me that magical degree behind my name. That's to me what MD stands for, magical degree. Right? That all of a sudden people will listen to you.
Right, yeah.
And so, as I said, I used all of the answers that I had found to start helping my real life clients get astounding results. And I'm not saying that to be vain, because it's not me. I'm just guiding them. And finally I closed down my practice and made the leap of faith and went online. And I've literally had clients from around the world, and some, like, for instance, like with severe pain that I've never seen. And I'm helping them with their pain, helping guide them to help themselves with their pain, even though I've never seen them or set, hands on them. And and it's guiding and it's mentoring and it's empowering them, teaching them the tools and strategies that they need. And that has been really, truly so fulfilling that it just keeps me going and going and going. And then I went beyond that and went, because for a long time I preached, you need to dial it back.
Yeah.
You need to have work-life balance. Right. But again, the stubborn part of me wants my cake and eat it too. And as I worked through this, I went, hang on. You don't have to sacrifice anything. You don't have to dial back anything, at least in the long term. In other words, I recognized that what had set me up for failure was not just that I worked hard. It was the massive energy drain on my systems from that faulty programming. And from what I lovingly call energy vampires, we can use the scientific term and say energy inefficiencies, right? Caused by the trauma. In other words, any time, like it's like breaking your bone, one of your bones. Don't have to do 10. Or spraining an ankle. Let's choose some. Let's get away from fractures. Sprain an ankle. It will heal on its own. But whether it will heal properly and optimally without intervention is a different matter, right? So if you have a 2nd-degree ankle sprain, then and you do nothing, it will eventually heal with a lot of scar tissue. What does that scar tissue do? It decreases down because it's not as stretchy, right? Like you all of a sudden, instead of being able to stretch, you've got this rigid part to it. And all of a sudden your function is decreased, and it takes way more energy to use that foot and the ankle mechanics of it. So not only are you more likely to sprain it again and again and again and again, and it gets easier and easier and easier to sprain it, to the point where you feel like all you do is like step on a pebble,
right,
and you re-sprain it. If anybody's ever had it, you'll know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. And so it keeps happening over and over and over again. And what happens then is that your body will try and compensate in other ways to make up for it. All, in other words, it'll do its best. It'll keep you soldiering on. Right. But at some point, it's going to be like that case of the straw that broke the camel's back. And it's the same thing in this case with the energy inefficiencies that I'm talking about. It's like, again, we'll take it away from things, but if you have your phone and, what would happen if you never updated it? Right? It would grind to a halt. It would get all glitchy, right? Like, so in other words, we think nothing about updating our phones, but we are dealing with and operating the most sophisticated computer in the universe that we know of. In other words, our brains, on basically caveman programming. And by that, I mean, like, that primitive part of our brain that runs the show 99.9999999 part of the time, right? Is that it's the same old, right? It's what we have in common with the animal kingdom as far as our survival instincts. And it houses the glitchy programming that we inherited from our parents, who inherited from their parents, who inherited from their parents, and so on and so forth, all the way back. Right? So this is what I realized, was that if I could help clients update their programming and eliminate those energy inefficiencies, my goodness, what are they capable of? Combine that with the genius of their estimated 100 billion brain cells, right? What can they not do? Literally, what can they not do? And so, and I will testify that, as I said, and I'm not a math genius, but I'm pretty sure a third of your brain times two sides, that works out to about a sixth. So that's roughly almost 20% of my son's brain that is missing. And look what he is doing with it. So what can we do with intact brains? Literally. And the beautiful part about that is that once you harness the genius of your mind and your brain and your energy, all of a sudden you are superpowered. You have that energy at your disposal that is the stuff that miracles are made of. And you can do anything. And that means that you can have your cake and eat it too. Gluten-free. Probably. Just saying.
Yeah. And I love
there
this.
is such a thing as good tasting gluten-free cake, by the way, guys.
Now there is, yeah. We're getting there eventually.
We're getting there. We'll talk about the carbs later, but we're talking like special occasions here.
Yeah.
I prefer to say apple crumble. I prefer apple crumble to cake.
And I just want to double click on two elements, two like themes of what you shared, because thank you for sharing all of that story. I feel like these really challenging life stories where there is real peril, real darkness, real potential other directions, other choices you could have made at any moment, are always the ones that create the institutes like you've created, the programs, the packages, and it sucks that it has to happen that way. But I love that there are people like you in this world who have created the thing to help other people avoid having to go to the depths of the darkness, and to support them. But the themes that I love about what you shared, the first element being so many of my so-called high performers are like, but why do I have to look at the like trauma stuff? And I'm like, you're already a high performer. Like you're already doing this business, or you've got this thing, or you're making this money. And there's bits and pieces that you don't love, but you're kind of quote unquote external metrics, you are successful. But you're doing that kind of still with your handbrake on of your car, because you're operating from this programming that is, you're having to almost go around yourself all the time because the motivations are different and difficult. And it's like, who could you be if you release the handbrake and actually and when you explain that to high performers, they suddenly get the reason to dig through the shit, basically.
Yes.
And I love that. But the other real theme that I adore about what you shared is the thrive potential provided with the right infrastructure. So the ability for the human organism to overcome seemingly insurmountable odds, like your son missing a third of his left hemisphere of his brain. It's just like, we would conventionally look at that and go, well, it's impossible then. And that I feel is what all the conventional medical professionals and some of the more alternative looking ones, there's this limitation perspective. But given the right circumstances, the right encouragement, the hard work, but the right environment, we have literally no idea what the human organism is capable of. And what I love about what
Absolutely.
you've shared is that you clearly made it a life's mission to bring that environment around your son and then your clients, and providing that infrastructure for thriving. It's almost like just stand back and watch possibilities emerge.
Absolutely. To piggyback on that, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Nelson Mandela that said, "Everyone always thinks something's impossible. That is until someone does it."
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Just as, they used to believe it was impossible for somebody to run a 4-minute mile. That is until Roger Bannister did it under subpar conditions. He was a medical student, worked like a full day in the lab, and then walked out onto a track that was soggy. It was raining. He didn't have like all the high tech equipment and shoes and everything that they do now. In other words, he was wearing his usual clodhoppers, and he just believed. He believed he could do it. And then as soon as he broke that 4-minute mile, people all around the world started doing it. And what was the difference? It was the belief.
Mm-hmm.
It was the belief, the believing to see it rather than the seeing to believe it. Because if you need to see it to believe it, there's an element of doubt. There's an element of fear that is going to block you. And in neurophysiological terms, you have a part of your brain called your reticular activating system, easier just to say RAS, that filters all incoming sensory stimuli so that literally you don't go crazy. Because like if you were conscious of every single stimulus that came in, like this is how my clothing's feeling, this is what my hair is doing, right, you would go crazy. There's like, unfortunately, has been, hopefully never again, who knows, a form of torture, like where they hyperstimulate you, right, and so you can go crazy. So the RAS, its job is to filter it out and decide what's important for you to consciously experience and be aware of. And how it does that is based on, it goes back into your programming, your files. It's like the library system in your unconscious mind. And it goes, does this match up? Nope. Okay, not important. Does this match up? Nope, not important. Oh, here's a memory. That means it must be important. Oh, they had this thought, has to be important. Right. So in other words, it's the neurophysiological basis of how you get what you focus on. So if you focus on what you can't have, you're going to keep getting what you can't have. Right. Because it literally causes a blind spot to the very solutions and strategies that would give you the results you need. That's why it's so important to believe first and see it as if it's already happened. And then that way, your unconscious mind goes, oh, when they compare, it's like, here's a match. We're going to keep this one. Right. And you'll start to see all little things of, oh, I never thought about that before. What if I do this? And all of a sudden, opportunities are going to start coming your way. And it doesn't have to be hard. Right. There's another way that the energy can be more efficient, is that it doesn't have to be as hard as we make it.
Yes. And I always think about this in terms of the difference between thinking of things in terms of probability, in terms of, well, that's clearly what's going to be the outcome, and possibility, and that opening of possibility, and then anchoring in belief. And I think that there is so many, from the health perspective, there's so many, well, this is going to be the prognosis types of things. And so many, but yet so many people every single day prove those wrong. And the difference is, when I got my own, like, you'll just have to live with this kind of diagnosis, prognosis thing, I was like, I don't think so. Sorry, I'm going over here and I'm going to find another way. And it wasn't done with any of that humor or attitude. It was just like, it was a non-compute for my system. And so I think looking and finding those examples of people who have, you know, refuted the odds, beaten the odds, just changed the outcome is inspiring and inspirational.
That's so true. That's so true. And yeah, belief is crucial because, you know, if I had done what most people do, and again, this is not judgmental. This is how we're programmed, right? To put doctors and experts up on that pedestal. And
The pedestal,
they must be
the
right.
white coat syndrome. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I literally, like, remember I said top neurosurgeon when he first delivered the news that my son wouldn't walk, talk, or pass high school, and that he would like be almost paralyzed on his right side. I said, "What about neuroplasticity?" And he went, "No, you don't understand. It's gone. It's gone. The tissue is gone." Like he got so upset at me. I can't begin to tell you the number of times I had esteemed experts, and I respect them fully, that would look at me like I had a cyclops or three horns or something. Like, I remember one neuropsychologist who I respect deeply, who had just finished a neuropsych assessment on my son and saying, "So," this was when he was going into high school, "Your son is 2 years behind in reading, and that gap is just going to get bigger. Do you understand?" And I just looked at him and I said, "So what I'm hearing you say is going back to the other points. You say that he has an above average auditory comprehension and above average working memory. So what I need to do is, especially going into high school where they have to learn Shakespeare, which is like a whole nother language unto its own, that, you know, and usually they just read the book. I need to pull in other resources." So when it came time for my son to take Shakespeare, one of his summer duties as part of his tutoring was that I took him to, I happened to be very fortunate and live next, you know, not next to, relatively close to Stratford, Ontario, the new Stratford, which has like a whole Stratford festival that runs. They have like a round stage like Shakespeare and everything. And so every time there was a, you know, it came time for him to do his Shakespeare for the year, I'd find out from the teacher what the book was going to be. And if there was a movie, we would watch the movie together first so that we could stop it. And so he could ask questions. So what does he mean by saying this? What does he mean by saying this? What do they mean by this? And then we would go see the play at Stratford. And then, you know, he would work with his tutor on the book and work through line by line by line on the book, right? And so in other words, again, if I had just listened, especially if I quailed under the pressure, the weight of these expert opinions, my son wouldn't even be talking right now. I remember I said when I was in hospital on SARS quarantine, the only contact for almost a couple months that I had with my sons was 15 minutes a day on a phone call where I would read them a bedtime story. I literally had somebody deliver to the hospital you know, a big bag of all their childhood books. And I would sit there and I would read them their bedtime story. And I remember one day getting a call from the speech pathologist who was giving me a report. this is like after my son had woken up, and, so he was probably a good month into it. And she said, well, Mom, it looks like the doctor was right, that, Brendan's only going to vocalize for the rest of his life. Vocalizing means just going, right, with no consonants, because that's all he's doing. He's just like, and he's pointing at a picture on a picture board.
Mm-hmm.
I went, really? Well, let me tell you what he says to me on the phone. I love you, Mommy. I miss you.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it was garbled, but I couldn't make that up. I'm on a phone, right? I said, let me tell you something about my son. My son is sunny and easygoing and, wonderful. But if you give him the baby card to play, like with a picture board and only expect him to go,
yeah,
he's going to have fun. That's number one, having you chase around, getting him everything that he needs.
Yep.
Right? Like it was, so it literally was, I had to have rock solid belief.
Sure.
Beyond belief, even conviction, expectation. In other words, I knew in my core, every fiber of my being, that he was already fine. As one of my friends says, it's already happened. Time just hasn't caught up with me yet.
For sure. Yeah.
Right. And so it's, in other words, I had to be so strong in my expectation and my knowledge.
Yeah. Because
if I wasn't, then it would have been so easy to slide back down. And even nowadays, I have people that, have tried to tell me that the Institute wasn't a good thing. It was going to fail, that it was, they didn't understand it. They couldn't understand, what's this success thing? What are you talking about success for? Because why do I talk about success, Victoria? And your listeners will probably agree with you, and you'll agree with me. It's like our high achiever, purpose-driven high achiever clients, they don't want to hear about burnout. They don't want to hear about stress. Don't tell me to dial it back. Right. So I talk about success. In other words, I talk about everything that they're going to be able to do once they optimize their programming and their energy efficiency. Right. And their mindset. Yes, that's part of it, but it's getting to that unconscious level. And so that is, it's like, even recently, I had to be like, I almost fell into the trap of, this person I respect so greatly is saying that I'm mistaken, that this is wrong. It's a waste of my time. It's going to be a waste of money, because trust me, it's like, it's, huge investment to create such a massive global endeavor.
Yeah.
And I thought about it. I think I had a pity party for a couple hours.
Of course.
Right. When I was like, well, maybe they are right. Maybe I need to rethink this. And then I remembered back to my son and went, what would have happened with him if I had just gone, oh, okay, doctor, you must be right. So please, 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 to all of your listeners, follow your gut instincts. Trust. Trust in your own instincts to know what's best for you, best for those you love, and come at it from a place of love rather than fear. That's how you'll know whether you're actually, like, whether this is really true or not. Yeah. And then just go, okay, this is happening. Don't know how, it's happening. Done deal. Boom.
Oh, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your insights, but also for having that moment in your hospital bed where you made your choice, because it feels like I don't care what anybody's opinion about your institute, and because I've seen the scope of it, and I'm just going to get you to touch on it slightly as we close out here. But I just feel like I'm so delighted that this world has people like you and you yourself in it to make those hard decisions, because it is easier to just go, okay, rather than go, okay, we're doing this somehow, some way, we're doing this. And so I'm supremely grateful to you and your fortitude for making those difficult choices, because I'm sure it wasn't just one. I'm sure there were multiple over and over again.
It was a series of choices and reaffirmations. Yes.
So now all of my listeners have fallen totally in love with you and want to stalk you everywhere and find out what you're doing in the Institute and want to find out more. Just give us a little, short elevator pitch on the Institute and how they can find out more and how they can get involved.
So as I said in the beginning, I created the Stress to Success Shift Institute to provide all the answers that I couldn't. And so that, because I will also say, so that it wasn't just the me show. Number one, I'm Libra, so maybe that has to play into it, that, we have partners and teams, and and collaborations. It's more fun that way. And at the same time, I've also been in that place in my life where, in that hospital bed, I thought I was indispensable to everyone before that. I thought that I could, nobody could do without me, that I had to be there for my patients, for my community, for my family, for my friends. And the reality is, when I had to say no, most people were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Next." And the only ones that I was indispensable to were the ones that I almost lost. And who almost lost me. Really, really, truly. And so I never want to be just the only one that everyone has to depend on. So we're on a mission. And I also recognize that I can't do this I could, let me reframe that. I could do it on my own, and I'm a very impatient person. I want things done yesterday. So
we're so similar.
I'm not surprised, Victoria, not surprised in the slightest. So I created the Institute to help me fast track going global, to provide those answers, because after 2 doctor degrees and, another degree and a bunch of certifications, and somebody said to me, "I really think you should get your PhD in education." And finally I went, no, I've had enough.
Yes.
Right. I don't need to be the one with all of the answers.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was a labor of love to pull this institute together, as I said, to provide 360-degree guidance and success to our clients, to our community, and to really, it was like, when I conceived the idea, it was like, man, I really wish. I got to a point where, when I had learned all the answers, I was like, I really wish I had had somebody to guide me when I was younger, so that none of this would have had to happen in the slightest. So everything that I do, that the Institute does, is about fast tracking and amplifying our clients' results, so that they don't have to spend the years of searching and investing and suffering, possibly. Right? Like, that was the whole purpose. In other words, I want to be that one where I have people pass me on the way up. I always say I'm not some kind of guru. I'm just in the trenches with you all, and maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead of you, but we're there, right? It's part of the journey. And I personally would rather be led by somebody who has been there and done that and been in the trenches, gotten their hands dirty, scraped their knee, felt the pain, than somebody who is a holier than thou guru who is, I'm being sarcastic, obviously, somebody who's never experienced that. Right. It would be like going to somebody for weight loss who's never had
always
to
been,
who's always been, slender, right? Like, it's like, I would much rather go with somebody who knows the ropes inside out. So to that end, we have created the Stress to Success Shift community. It's a private community hosted off Facebook, so that you don't have to go to, and deal with spam or negativity or ads or any of the other things that people hate about Facebook. So it is our own private community. And do you want me to say the links, or shall I give you the links?
I will put all the links in the show notes. If you want to say where people can find you, so to avoid people finding clicky things, then be more than my guest.
Finding clicky things. Right. So I make everything really easy. My basic line is URL is drirene.life / and then all of the other ones are, you can do free community, all one word. That's for our community. We do have paid levels where they need to invest. In other words, we have different tiers and levels to meet everyone where they are at in their journey. Sure. And the free community, the starter level, is completely free, zero to join. So that's drirene.life / free community. If they want to see what their current risk of flameout syndrome, which is, in other words, their current risk for developing serious illness or injury, that is a very comprehensive assessment. It's over 100 questions.
Wow.
It is derived from and enhanced from to at least 3 other scientifically validated assessments. Right. And then I've added my own on top. Like, literally over 200,000 people have gone through various forms of or parts of this assessment, and I have drawn them all together into this one. And it's called the Flameout Syndrome Risk Assessment. And that one is drirene.life / flameout quiz. Easy, right?
Right. Yeah. I love easy links. And then, yes.
Easy. I know, because, I had a brain injury as part of my, as part of my, on top of the 10 bones. So it's like, I like things to be easy too, because, I think some brain cells were lost. I'm no longer the genius that I remember before. So, and then our website is successshift.institute.com.
I will put all of those links in the show notes, as well as people finding them. It's a no-brainer. Join the free community and understand what this vibration is all about. And then you can upgrade to paid levels should you wish to, should you feel like it's your family, your home. And what I would say to everyone is that it has never been a more important time to do things in community. So when people like Dr. Irene provide free communities, join them all, especially when they're not on Facebook, and learn what you don't know, and be with people who are interested in the same things that you are. And I'm sure that everyone listening is kind of inspired by your story today. And I'm so appreciative of you taking the time to not only come and talk to me, but share so fully and freely. And thank you to your son as well, who allows you to share this story as part of your journey and your success story, because I'm sure, it takes something for him to be spoken about in this way as well. So thank you to your entire family.
Thank you, Victoria. Thank you so much for asking me to come here and share.
Thank you. Well, wasn't that a story and a half, everyone? I hope that you found some value and some nuggets of wisdom in all that Dr. Irene shared with me today. As I said at the beginning, Dr. Irene has a very exclusive research edition of her Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp 2.0 starting in September the 26th. And that can be found in the show notes. We will give you all the links, the ones that Dr. Irene mentioned, and the links to this Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp 2.0 starting in September the 26th. I had a little sneak peek of what is involved in Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp, and for anyone who is interested at all in the total 360-degree success that Dr. Irene and I spoke about today, this is the thing to do. And Dr. Irene is so passionate about making this a standard of care that she is having a very special research edition of this, where she is gathering information and ensuring that this kind of care can come into a much more standardized way of addressing complex illnesses and all sorts of problems. So do head now to the show notes where you can find all the links that you need to get involved with Dr. Irene's free community, her Stress to Success S.H.I.F.T Institute, and this Retrain Your Brain Bootcamp program starting this month. And with that, all that's left to say is that if you are interested in free communities, the Unveil community also now exists. Please head to unveilcommunity.com and you can join us again completely free there, where we're discussing all things health, wealth, and humaning.